Greetings YouTube, this is the Starman once again. I'm feeling a lot better. Last video I uploaded, which was the prologue, I was a little sick, and if you couldn't tell, I was insanely congested. Now however, I'm feeling better, and I shall be reading chapter 1 of my book. It's quite a long one, so you might want to get some popcorn or something. Well, just kidding. Anyways, here it goes. Chapter 1. I awoke to blinding sunlight beaming down through the thick leaves of a giant oak tree. I grunted and closed my eyes tightly in shock to the unexpected rays of light as they hit my tired eyes and momentarily blinded me. I rolled over onto my stomach and opened my eyes slowly so that they could adjust to the brightness of my surroundings. Where am I? I muttered as I tried to stand up. I managed to rise up onto my elbows a bit, but quickly found that I couldn't stand up any further. I was so busy looking at my surroundings that I didn't even notice that there was something wrong. Something, horribly wrong. I looked down at my hands, and my mouth dropped when I saw that they weren't actually hands, but hooves. "What in the world?" I exclaimed as I unsteadily rose up on all fours. I had a tough time adjusting to my new posture, but once I was sure I wouldn't lose my footing and fall, I took a look at myself. Indeed, I was standing on four hooves, and from what I could see, is that I was covered with brown fur. I looked back at my flank and found that my neck was infinitely more flexible than it used to be. And once I looked back, I seen that I had a long black tail, and as well as part of a black mane as well. I stammered to myself in disbelief. My mind was still trying to grasp onto the fact, despite the evidence was so clearly in front of me. "A stallion," I said to myself. "But does that mean?" I started, but I trailed off as I tried to maneuver my legs so I could turn around to see my surrounding area more clearly. Once I managed to position myself without tripping, I looked up and beheld it. There, just over the grassy plains that lay before me, was Ponyville. I was hit by a barrage of different emotions all at once. I immediately fell down and began to cry tears of joy. God had heard my prayers and gave me that which I wanted most in life. I prayed, giving thanks and blessing His name, all in the joy that I was feeling at that moment. I felt as though I was hit with a realization that I'd finally come home. Once I regained my composure, I once again unsteadily rose onto my feet, or I should say hooves, and looked back towards Ponyville. I was on the top of a big hill overlooking the village. The town was quite a distance away, and although my vision was partially obscured by the buildings and trees, I could see ponies roaming about the streets, going about their business. The town looked just like it did on the show on television. It was a beautifully colored town with buildings of all shapes and sizes with straw roofs, all of which were nestled under the summit of a mountain range. I gazed over to my left and saw a few rows of apple trees, and I guessed that those trees were the beginning part of Sweet Apple Acres. As I looked at the trees, I also noticed that there was a road that led from Ponyville into the rows of trees and beyond farther into the land. The sight of the apples made my stomach rumble, and just then I noticed how hungry I really was. Confused as to why I was so hungry, I took a look at the sun, and I noticed that it was well past midday. "No wonder I'm hungry," I said aloud to myself as I went to take a step. When I lifted my hoof up, however, I quickly found myself off balance, and before I could react, I fell over and began to tumble down the hill. Along my way down, I had the misfortune of hitting an unearthed part of a root, and sorry, I lost my place. Sorry about that. An unearthed part of a root, which caused me to let out a yelp of surprise and pain as I continued onward. A heartbeat later, I hit a trunk of another tree, and I had the wind completely knocked out of me. I lay there gagging until I could breathe again, and then I laid there for a moment to catch my breath. Then I slowly tried to raise up onto my hooves again. I let out a groan as my back popped at a few places when I got up on all fours. I looked back up at the hill and at the root that I'd fallen on, and I just muttered the word, ouch. It wasn't really all that too enthusiastic, but that's all I could really say on that matter. I lifted my right hoof up and shook it a little bit to relieve some pressure that was on it. After a moment of doing that, I put my hoof carefully back down on the ground, glad I didn't lose my balance again, and I cringed as the joint cracked a few times as I put pressure back on it. I took some time to stretch my sore body. All the while I got used to being on four legs. Once I felt my joints stopped aching from the fall, I gazed back over toward Sweet Apple Acres. The sight of the apples once again made my stomach let out another growl. "Okay," I said, getting ready to try to take another step. "Let's try this again." I carefully took one step forward, then another, followed by another, and before I knew it, I was walking straight. A bit unsteadily, mind you, but still forward nonetheless. I slowly made my way towards the apple trees, and on my way there I took in the beauty of the world around me. A slight breeze was blowing, making gentle waves on the grass as I walked through the field. All around me I could see wildlife roaming all throughout the landscape. Birds flew through the air, singing their beautiful songs that could be heard throughout the land. Rabbits went to and fro around the fields eating flowers, as well as an occasional deer that came to join them. Equestria was as beautiful as I imagined it would be. I eventually came to the edge of the grassy plain where the grass met the dirt road that led to Ponyville. I stopped there for a moment and took a look at the other direction where the road led. The road that came out from the town split into two different directions, one of which that led into Sweet Apple Acres, and the other that led into a vast expanse of farmland and grassy fields. In the distance, there were snow-covered mountain ranges and vast, elegant-looking clouds. There was one cloud that especially caught my eye, one that looked as though it was physically designed, not made naturally. I looked away from it and back towards the apple trees. I felt a deep happiness once more as I looked upon the pristine landscape around me. I had gotten what I wanted more than anything else, and words couldn't describe the emotion I felt at that moment. It was a sense of harmony, a realization that I had finally made it home after a lifetime of torment and betrayal. I no longer had to worry about the evils of the life that I left behind, and for that, I truly felt at peace. I said another prayer of thanks as I continued forward. I crossed the road and took this small path that led close to the first row of apple trees. I noticed that there was some white fencing that encircled the border around the premises of the property, and I took time to go around the fence so I could savor every moment of being there in Equestria. As I approached the apple trees, I noticed that there were baskets scattered around the base of each tree. Some trees were picked clean of apples and the baskets underneath them were full, while others had still yet to be harvested. I looked down the path that led to the heart of Sweet Apple Acres, and I was astonished to see how far back it went. It went on for miles on end, and in the distance, a little speck on the horizon, was the farm itself. All around the farm, in every direction, was nothing but apple trees. They went on as far as the eye could see, so much so that I couldn't even see the end of the property itself. I shook my head at the thought of how long it would take any pony, actually, I should say a whole army of ponies, just to harvest all the apples that lay before me. My thoughts were interrupted from another rumble from my stomach. Without another thought, I approached the nearest harvested tree and began to eat out of one of the apples, or one of the baskets that lay beneath it. The apples were the sweetest thing that I had ever tasted before in my life. Their mouth-watering goodness topped even the most juiciest of fruits that were on earth. "Oh my, these are the best apples I've ever tasted!" I exasperated as I continued to eat. I wasn't sure if it was the fact that I was hungry or if it was because the apples were so delicious, but either way, I couldn't seem to get enough of them. Now, hold on. I need to pause for a second here. I'm going to try to sound like a character from the show, and you're probably going to laugh because I'll sound nothing like her. It's going to be Applejack, because considering, but again, just letting y'all know that I suck at impressions from characters of the show. Just thought I was willing to know. Anyways, here we go. Sorry about that. "What in tarnation are you doing eating my apples?" a voice demanded from behind me. I froze and almost choked in surprise. I recognized the voice immediately. "Well, are you deaf or what? I asked you a question," the voice said, sounding more irritated. I swallowed the last bit of apple that I still had in my mouth and turned to face the pony behind me. When I saw who it was, I nearly gasped. It was none other than Applejack herself. Applejack looked exactly like she had in the show. She had a light brown coat and a yellow-colored mane and tail. Her mane was braided into a long ponytail which hung down over her left side, and she also had the same signature cowboy hat that fit perfectly on her head. She even had the same distinguishable freckles on her muzzle. I would have jumped in joy at the sight of her if it wasn't for one thing. She looked furious. "Who do you think you are, coming onto my farm and eating my family's apples without permission?" she yelled, stomping a hoof on the ground. You see, I was hungry and I thought that," I stammered, trying to come up with a good excuse, but she interrupted me before I could finish. "You thought what? That you could just come on over here and eat my family's apples without paying? Is that it, huh?" "No, I didn't. I just—" "Well, you thought wrong, Buster. We worked really hard to grow these apples, and I'm not about to let some thief walk on over here and just take them without paying. Now pay up," she demanded, holding out a hoof. "Pay? I can't pay. I don't have any money. I just got here and Applejack slammed the hoof she extended out to me on the ground, and I took a step back in surprise. I had never seen her get this mad before on the show. She looked like she was about to murder me. "I suggest you leave, boy," she said through gritted teeth. "If I catch you here again, I'll get Big Macintosh and we will personally rip your head off your shoulders. Is that understood?" I nodded and took a step back. Another step back. "Good. Now get out of here," she snapped. She didn't need to tell me twice. I instinctively reared back and galloped past her and didn't bother to look back. I was so focused on trying to get away that I didn't even take the few extra seconds to go around the fence. Instead, I jumped right over it and kept running. I didn't stop until I was sure that Applejack wasn't following me. When I felt relatively safe, I slowed to a trot. I couldn't believe what just happened. I had literally met an actual character from the show. Unfortunately, I made her mad before I could even introduce myself. In reality, what's worse is that I made her believe that I was nothing more than a worthless thief. After a minute later, I stopped trotting and looked back towards Sweet Apple Acres, and sure enough, Applejack was still there. She was standing over the basket I was eating from and was throwing out the apples I had taken bites out of. She stood there for a few minutes, picking out the bad apples, and once she finished, she shook her head and hoisted the basket onto her back and began to walk down the trail that led to her farm. I let out a sad sigh and looked away towards the oak tree that I woke up under. It was a massive tree that easily was hundreds of years old. Its massive branches slightly blocked out the sun, casting a big shadow over the landscape. I marveled about this world I now found myself in. All my life prior to the miracle that had brought me here, I lived in a dying world that was full of corruption. However, there in Equestria, life was abundant, and the world was perfect. I no longer had to live in fear ever again. It truly was the greatest thing that had ever happened to me. My thoughts suddenly returned to Applejack. I looked back over towards Sweet Apple Acres and found that she was already completely out of sight. However, I did catch sight of another mare starting to walk down the trail towards the farm. She was an average-sized pony that had jet black fur. Her mane and tail was dark blue in color, as well as her hooves. The pony also wore a charcoal black backpack that was secured around her neck and was resting on her back. The pony was just casually walking down the trail, and after a moment I completely lost sight of her as well as she disappeared behind the trees. I started to wonder about the strange mare, but a giant shadow flying overhead snapped my mind back to reality. I gazed upward and saw a beautifully designed golden chariot being pulled towards Ponyville by two white Pegasi ponies that wore royal-looking golden helmets. I listened closely and caught sound of two familiar voices emanating from within the chariot. I couldn't physically see the occupants because of it being so high up, but I did catch sight of a part of a purple mane flowing in the wind over the side. "Look on the bright side, Twilight. The princess arranged for you to stay in a library. Doesn't that make you happy?" "Yes, yes it does. You know why? Because I'm right. I'll check on the preparation as fast as I can, then get to the library." It was all I managed to hear before the chariot got too far away and out of earshot, but despite this, I still knew who it was. It was Twilight Sparkle and Spike the Dragon on their way to Ponyville. The princess must have just sent them from Canterlot to check on the preparations for the summer sun celebration. Maybe this was my chance to introduce myself properly to some pony after all. I took a quick glance back towards Sweet Apple Acres once more. Applejack and the other strange pony were already long gone. I felt really bad about how my encounter with Applejack had turned out, but deep down inside I knew that I would have another chance to fix things. I shook my head in contempt and looked back towards Ponyville. The chariot was about to cross over the top of the trees and set out in the first set of the buildings and head towards the center of town. Without waiting another second, I started to gallop towards Ponyville with the knowledge of what I was going to do. I was going to meet Twilight Sparkle. Alright, YouTube, that's the end of Chapter 1. It's, like I said, it was fairly long, I will admit, but also short considering some of the other fan fictions out there. But I will let you all know now, I am typing up Chapter 2 currently, and it's just about completely finished, and I'm not going to lie, it's nearly twice as long as this, so, yeah. Anyways, I'm going to hop off of here. You can expect Chapter 2 to be uploaded sometime next week, if all goes well, or maybe even sooner. After Chapter 2, though, there may be like a week or so wait for Chapter 3, because I'm still writing it. Well, anyways, hope you enjoyed Chapter 1, and I will get back to you all. Take care, YouTube. Thanks for watching.